Have you ever sat at a table where every smile felt rehearsed, where the laughter sounded too perfect to be real? That's how it was for me, sitting across from my in-laws, pretending to enjoy lunch, when a single message flashed across my phone. It read, "Don't react. They're recording you." And that's the moment everything changed. Because what they planned as my downfall turned into their biggest mistake. Hi lovelies, welcome back to Tales by Laura, where every story reminds us that truth always finds its way out, no matter how deep people try to bury it. Today's story will have you gripping your seat. It's about betrayal, hidden cameras, and a woman who turned silent humiliation into the loudest justice of all. If you're new here, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss how this lunch turned into a lesson nobody in that family will ever forget. Now, let's begin. At Sunday lunch with my in-laws, the room sounded like a silverware parade, clinks and polite laughter marching around my nerves. Bernice Carter, my mother-in-law, smiled with the brightness of a chandelier no one asked to turn on. My brother-in-law studied the salt shaker like it was a test. And my husband, Rashad, ate his catfish in collards as if nothing in the world was unusual. My phone hummed against my thigh. Unknown number. Don't react. They're recording you. I kept my face easy, the way black women are taught to carry storms like handbags. Inside, 1,000 papers scattered in the wind. Recording me? For what? Proof I breathed wrong. I sipped water, let my eyes wander. A family photo frame sat a little crooked, like a tilted crown. A wall outlet cover wasn't flush. A tiny new vase appeared on the sideboard, white ceramic, hollow and watching. I am Zoe Miles, 32, a community literature teacher who reads tone like other people read headlines. Subtext is my mother tongue. And every note in that dining room was off-key. Bernice had never forgiven Rashad for marrying a woman who didn't arrive with a pedigree. She liked to float little sermons dressed as compliments. Some people marry because they are running from something, she'd said at a cookout, smiling at the guests while slicing me open with the back of a spoon. Rashad had stayed quiet then, like quiet was a virtue. That message felt like a life preserver tossed from an invisible hand, warning or test. I didn't know. But I knew what not to do, give them a scene. If a camera wanted chaos, I would serve grace, and then I would make my own record. I laughed at a story no one told, asked for more cornbread, and helped stack plates. When we left their townhouse in Northwood, the humidity hugged me, thick as a sweater. In the car, Rashad talked about a client at his firm, Dorsey, Pike and Row, something about a compliance review. I nodded, counting breaths, a choir of questions in my chest. That night, Rashad slept like a man who believed sleep was a birthright. His snore rose and fell, steady as a metronome. I cracked the office door and slipped inside. The desktop glowed. A folder sat in the corner of the screen like a dare. BCup_ZM. My initials. Not subtle. My hands shook, but my training as a teacher kicked in. Slow, deliberate, annotate later. Click. Rows of files, labeled by date and rooms. Kitchen_06_14. Move bath_06_28. Move bed_07_10. Move hall_07_12. Move. My stomach flipped. Acid and ice. The bathroom. The bedroom. The hallway where Isaiah, our 8-year-old, parked his toy trucks. I opened a clip. Though I was on the couch, phone to my telling my therapist I felt watched. The irony would have been funny any other day. I clicked another. A late-night cry. Only the calendar on the wall told me this couldn't be the night they spliced it with. Shirts I wore weeks later showed up in Alia meltdowns. Someone was editing reality, turning me into the story they needed. Not surveillance. Scaffolding. A narrative being built to hold a verdict they'd already written. I copied everything to a new external drive I'd bought months ago for lesson plans. I created a new email under a name no one knew I ever used and sent an encrypted archive to myself. I set a password my grandmother would have loved, a line from her church hymn that only our family could finish. When I crept back to bed, Rashad rolled toward me in his sleep and slung an arm across my waist. I stayed at the ceiling. If a stranger had warned me, maybe I wasn't alone. Or maybe they were measuring if I was gullible enough to explode on camera. The next morning, I filed for medical leave, acute stress. Principal Gaines raised his brows but signed the paperwork without a speech. I packed a tote with headphones, a sweater, and the drive, and took a bus to the Enoch Pratt branch where the air smelled like paper and patience. For 2 days, I watched myself live my life on a public computer, timestamp after timestamp, clip after clip, a documentary no one asked for. On the third afternoon, I found the conversation that pried something steel-hard awake in me. Isaiah sat on his bed, clutching his stuffed tiger, talking to Bernice. Her voice carried that syrupy Sunday school tone that always felt like a trap. Soon your mama will be going away for a while. The house will be yours and Daddy's. You'll be okay. The children's mural behind them, clouds and kites I painted by hand, blurred as tears fought their way up my throat. I swallowed them whole. I saved the clip. I saved everything. And then I looked up law firms that specialized in digital stalking and coercive control in family disputes. The receptionist at Waters and Hill said, "Come now." Attorney Tasha Hill watched 5 minutes of footage and leaned back like the chair had turned to ice. "They didn't dig a hole," she said. "They pawed the concrete and wrote their names in it. We moved quick. A forensic review request. A petition to prohibit unsupervised contact between Bernice and Isaiah based on documented manipulation. A motion to search for and seize hidden devices. Every paragraph we drafted felt like I was stitching my skin back together one measured word at a time. I rode home in a rideshare, both hands wrapped around my tote. Rashad had texted a thumbs up about dinner. I cooked anyway, rice and kale, oven chicken, because stability is also an argument you make in the quiet language of routine. Friday, the cart email arrived, temporary suspension of Bernice's contact with Isaiah pending review. Relief landed in me like rain on dry earth. I printed 3 copies and tucked them in the places men like Rashad think documents go to die, my Bible, my hair bonnet box, and the back of Isaiah's art portfolio. That evening, the doorbell rang. Bernice's voice shot through the screen like a siren. "What did you do, Z? You ungrateful girl." Isaiah startled in the hallway. I locked the door and turned up the jazz. She could knock until the moon clocked out. The law finally spoke louder than her. By morning, messages were scrawled into the paint on my car doors. Crazy, monster, bad mum. Isaiah saw first. His small mouth made a worried "oh no child should learn to make." I knelt beside him and said, "Whoever did that is hurting. We're safe." I told the truth as far as it would stretch. I called the police. Photos. Questions. A shrug about the lack of street cameras. I kept my shrug to myself. The microcam I tucked into the garage Eve had been watching all night with a tiny, faithful eye. The footage showed a woman in a black coat signing my gate with white paint like it was a birthday card. Her walk was Bernice's sermon stride. Tasha watched the clip and smiled without joy. Now we have everything. We filed for a restraining order. It felt like lighting a candle in a cave. Small, flickering, but undeniably light. At dinner that night, Rashad clattered his fork against the plate. "You're ripping this family in half." I let the wides fall the way plates do when there's no table under them. The noise said enough about where he stood, behind the camera, beside his mother, never next to me. That was the moment I understood the real fight wasn't to make them love me or even believe me. It was to protect Isaiah and own my story out loud. If they were building a case in the dark, I would build a lighthouse in public. And I knew exactly where to start. Over the next week, I turned my living room into a quiet command center. While cartoons hummed for Isaiah, I built timelines, labeled clips, and color-coded names on sticky notes like a teacher grading a test the world kept failing. Every time my phone buzzed, my shoulders climbed to my ears. Rashad moved around the house with restless hands, opening drawers, checking my laptop lid, asking questions that sounded like kindness but landed like audits. "You're working a lot, Zoo. Want me to help with whatever that is?" "You could start by asking your mother to follow the court order," I said, keeping my tone cool as a winter window. He laughed without teeth. "You act like you're the only parent in this house." One afternoon, Isaiah came home from school quieter than usual. While he washed up for dinner, I unzipped his backpack to sign a permission slip. A folded paper slid free. Curvy handwriting. No signature. "You need to leave. They're going to use the boy." I didn't sit. I couldn't. A slow, Heavy calm settled over me, the kind born on nights when your grandmother prays and every candle in her house seems to answer. The warning wasn't a rumor, it was a map. Someone inside their cycle still had a pulse. I took the note straight to Tasha. "We're adding an emergency clause," she said. "And we'll ask for a forensic sweep of your house, again." The judge granted a tighter order by midweek, 0 contact for Bernice, no unscheduled pickups, and a mandate for a new device scan. The officer who came with the tech team looked embarrassed for us all as he peered under lampshades and along baseboards. They found nothing new that day, but sometimes absence is a kind of testimony. Whoever planted eyes in my walls before understood how to hide their hands. That night, Bernice stood on the sidewalk and hollered like the neighborhood was a stage show. I let the door be a wall. The next morning, my car carried her sermon in white paint. The police report felt like a thin blanket in a blizzard, but the garage camera footage was a coat with a hood and deep pockets. Tasha filed the restraining order. The court stamped it fast. Rashad slammed his utensils at Sunday lunch, as if he wanted the table to confess. "You're poisoning Isaiah against my mother." "Your mother vandalized our property," I said. The court didn't write these orders for fun. He rubbed his forehead like I was a migraine he'd chosen and now regretted. That night, I saw his reflection in my laptop screen as he tried my password. First my birthday, then our anniversary, then Isaiah's jersey number. I let him strike out, closed the lid, and asked if he wanted tea. He said no, but his eyes said, "How much do you know?" I knew enough to stop surviving in the dark. I booked a small event space on the east side, a quiet room with a clean wall, velvet chairs, and a projector that didn't hum too loudly. I called it a birthday supper in the invitations and wrote the kind of message people like Bernice can't resist. "Life is short. Let's make peace." Replies poured in faster than truth ever does. Smiley faces. "So proud of your maturity, Zoe." Blessings from cousins who only call when the wind is gossip. 2 days before the dinner, Rashad's sister, Fallon, texted, "Can we talk? Just us." We met at a little cafe near the transit stop where everybody minds their business. Fallon didn't order. She twisted her ring and stared at the table. "I can't carry it anymore," she said finally. "This thing they're doing, Mama, Rashad, the firm, it's too far." I felt the room tilt. She pulled a folded printout from her bag and slid it across the table, the way people push letters into church collection plates when the note costs more than tithes. Subject line, plan of Z spirals. Beneath it, bullet points about camera placements, suggested phrases to trigger me, dates, and a list of reliable witnesses. "You were CC'd?" I asked. She shook her head. "I shouldn't even have this. But I saw the email open on Mama's tablet and forwarded it to myself months ago. I told myself I'd delete it. I didn't." "Why now?" Fallon's voice shrank. "Because I heard Mama tell Isaiah he wouldn't see you soon. Because I know what Rashad is trying to file. Because if I had a daughter, I'd want someone to break ranks for her." She slid a flash drive toward me. "There's more. Messages. Audio. Keep me out of it, please." I walked out with the drive burning a hole through my purse like a coal you don't feel until it brands you later. At home, I watched and listened until my jaw ached from clenching. There was Rashad on a call with a colleague from Dorsey, Pike and Row, outlining a strategy that sounded less like parenting and more like asset recovery. There was Bernice coaching lines to cousins. Say she forgets bills. Say she cries a lot. Tasha didn't blink when I showed her. "This isn't just family ugliness," she said, tapping the screen. "It's coordinated defamation and illegal surveillance, with a dash of attempted court manipulation. We're broadening the case." We filed new motions by noon: defamation, stalking, invasion of privacy, and attempted interference with custody proceedings. The judge moved faster than I've ever seen a courthouse move. A protective order was extended to cover me and Isaiah fully. Service papers went out like gusts before a storm. Still, I kept the dinner on the calendar. I needed the truth to breathe in front of all their curated faces. I hired a tech pro named Dion who didn't ask for context, only file formats. "I'll cue it on your signal," he said. He wore a hoodie and a patience I could trust. On the morning of the dinner, an envelope lay on my welcome mat. No return address, no flourish. Inside, a photocopy of a real estate contract transferring our house to a woman I'd never met. Buyer, Marin Lope. Signatures inked like confessions. The date, 2 days ago. My throat went dry, but my spine didn't bend. I took a picture for the file, slid the copy into a plastic sleeve, and put on a simple black dress. That evening, the room filled with teeth, smiles, greetings, churchy hugs. Bernice arrived with flowers she didn't pick. Cousins lined up casseroles like shields. Rashad hovered near the back, phone in his hand, pretending to scroll. I raised my glass. Thank you for coming. I nodded toward Dion. The lights softened. The first image filled the wall, me reading to Isaiah, his head tucked under my chin. A soft beginning. Then split screen, their edits beside my originals. Laughter stitched onto twos. Dates sliced and pasted out of order. A quiet night turned into a storm. Gasps punched holes in the room's oxygen. Bernice slapped the table. You are setting me up. From the far side, her husband, usually a shadow, stood. His voice was hoarse with something like shame. You set this up, Bernice. I bought a camera. You turned it into a trap. This, with Isaiah. No. Rashad made a move toward the projector booth. Dion leaned back, unfazed, and tapped the next cue. Audio. Rashad's voice, measured and ugly. We'll push until she breaks. Custody will be easy after that. The house follows. Aunties stayed at their shoes. An uncle slipped out the side door. Fallon cried without sound. I stood steady, not because I felt strong but because the truth had finally grown legs. No one clapped. No one argued. When the lights came up, people couldn't meet my eyes. Bernice sat small for the first time in her life, hands knit tight, mouth thin. Rashad's look wasn't confusion or even anger. It was a calculation running out of road. My phone buzzed as I reached the car. Court. Temporary full custody granted. No contact order enforced pending hearing. The words settled over me like a warm quilt sewn by women who'd survived Woes and still found time to hem the edges. At home, a white envelope waited on my coffee table. No stamp. No handwriting I knew. Inside, a photograph of me sleeping, last night's scarf, last night's book half open on the nightstand. On the back, in block letters, you still don't know what I can do. The room shrank and expanded. I checked the windows, doors, and the back gate. I called Tasha. Bag it. Police. Now, she said. I did exactly that. For the next 3 nights, I slept with the lamps on and a kitchen knife tucked under the pillow like a grim bedtime story. Every pop of a settling house felt like a footstep. Fear tried to braid itself into my hair. I refused to let it hold. Tasha filed for perimeter protections with electronic alerts. The judge approved. Fast again. If anyone we named crossed the digital fence around my home, my phone would sing. It helped. But safety is more than distance. It's the mind's right to rest. Mine hadn't earned that yet. So I set the next piece in motion. The restraining order gave me space, but not peace. Because peace is more than silence. It's trust in your walls. And I had none left. Rashad began playing the victim. On social media, he posted old family photos, me holding Isaiah at his 5th birthday, Bernice kissing his cheek, captioned with words like family should never be torn apart and some people just can't forgive. The comments were filled with sympathy for him. Friends I hadn't heard from in months messaged, Z, are you okay? He sounds heartbroken. Heartbroken. That man built a cage, handed me the blueprint, and still expected applause. I tried to ignore the online noise, but one night, curiosity won. I created an anonymous account and began posting the unedited videos, one by one, each clip paired with the truth. Date. Context. No insults. Just facts. It started with a dozen views. Then hundreds. Then thousands. By the 5th upload, local reporters were calling it the Miles Files, a story about manipulation, hidden cameras, and domestic gaslighting. Women I'd never met began sending me messages. I went through this too. For the first time, I realized the word victim could also mean witness. 3 days after the 5th video went viral, I received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the line was low, metallic, disguised. You're exposing too much, and we're not the only ones watching. The call ended before I could respond. My chest tightened. That voice wasn't Rashad's. It wasn't Benice's either. It had an echo, like someone speaking through layers of wires and distance. Tasha called it intimidation. I called it confirmation. My revenge was working. Still, fear crept back like humidity, invisible but heavy. I checked the locks twice every night, replaced the bolts, and changed the Wi-Fi password. But every ping of my phone made me flinch. Then, one message changed everything. It came from a woman named Nia Jeffers, through the anonymous page. "He did this to me too," she wrote. "Years ago. Nobody believed me." Her words glowed on my screen like a confession whispered through fire. We agreed to meet at a diner halfway between our towns. She arrived in a grey hoodie, her hands trembling as she stirred sugar into black coffee. "Rashad recorded me too," she said. "Same tactics. Claimed I was unstable, unfit, emotional. He had help from his boss at the firm. They built cases against women quietly." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I backed out of court because his mother threatened to ruin me professionally. I just wanted to breathe again." The pattern was undeniable. Predators in tailored suits, moving like lawyers but thinking like hunters. That night, I gave her my lawyer's number. She gave me old screenshots, receipts, and a half-forgotten recording from her phone. In it, Rashad's voice said, "Once we get her declared unfit, we'll get the house back too." Same tone, same plan, different woman. Tasha and I began combing through Rashad's old firm records. The deeper we went, the darker it grew. Behind every legal motion, there was a puppet string. And at the top of that web sat Gerald Rowe, senior partner of Dorsey, Pike and Rowe, the same man who'd mentored Rashad for years. Rowe's signature appeared on multiple property transfers, all to shell accounts later linked to Benice all women like Marin Lope, the fake homebuyer. It wasn't just a family conspiracy. It was a business model. They use emotional manipulation to strip women of property, Tasha said, flipping through printouts. Then they bury the paper trail under legal jargon. We gathered everything: Nia's testimony, the hidden camera evidence, the fraudulent contract, and the voice recordings. When we were done, the file was thick enough to break a briefcase. Tasha smiled grimly. "You wanted justice, Zoe? Let's burn the system that built them." The next morning, I found a brown envelope slipped under my door. Inside was the title transfer for my home, finalized under Marin Lafay's name. Signed, stamped, and dated. It was done before I even stood on the courthouse steps. That betrayal was surgical. It didn't bleed, it carved. But this time, instead of rage, I felt clarity. They wanted me desperate. I'd give them a strategy. The firm was hosting its annual charity gala, a televised event celebrating family values in law. Rashad and Rowe were scheduled to speak. That was where I'd finish it. I spent the next week planning like an architect of retribution. Dion helped me compile a short film, clips, contracts, voice recordings, everything, neatly timed and captioned. On the night of the gala, the hall shimmered with wealth. Crystal chandeliers, silk gowns, laughter that smelled like money. Rashad stood on stage in a charcoal suit, preaching integrity with a smile that could sell lies wholesale. Rowe nodded beside him, the picture of moral decay in designer frames. When the applause came, I stepped forward, heels clicking like punctuation. "Excuse me," I said into the mic, "before you all celebrate family values, I think you should see what these men really stand for." Dion hit play. The screens behind them lit up, first with the hidden camera videos, then the audio files, then the contracts. Faces in the audience froze, mirrors reflecting disbelief. Rowe's jaw slackened. Rashad lunged toward the projector booth, but security blocked him. The sound of my own recorded sobs filled the room, followed by his voice plotting to take my child and home. The hypocrisy shattered under fluorescent light. Some people gasped. Others filmed. When it ended, I simply said, "This is not revenge. This is the truth with the lights on." Then I walked out. By sunrise, news outlets were calling it the Miles exposé. The firm suspended both men indefinitely. Rowe was under investigation for fraud. The fake home transfer was voided by court order. And the final custody ruling came in. Full custody granted to me. Isaiah was safe, legally, emotionally, and spiritually. But just when I thought it was over, something arrived that reminded me peace isn't a destination, it's an intermission. A message. A single text. No name. No emojis. Just a photograph of a brand new house and 5 words underneath. You won. But it's not over. The address was real. And what I found next would prove that even when monsters lose the battle, they rarely stop hunting. The message came on a rainy Thursday night. A photo of a house I didn't recognize. Caption. You won. But it's not over. It wasn't a threat that screamed. It whispered. And whispers are worse. They crawl inside your thoughts and rearrange your peace. I searched the address. It was a new construction on the outskirts of the city, a quiet development where the streets had no trees yet, only streetlights standing like sentinels. No one was listed under the address. No public records. Just a name, Marin Lope, again. That name followed me like smoke. Days passed. Then, one morning, a dark sedan appeared across the street. Tinted windows. Engine off. Motionless. At first, I convinced myself it was a coincidence, maybe a neighbor's guest. But when it came back on Saturday, and again on Sunday, sitting in the same spot from sunrise to dusk, I knew coincidence had packed up and left. I called the police. By the time they arrived, the car was gone. They took my statement, nodded politely, and left. The silence afterward was heavier than their promises. That night, I installed high-definition cameras around the house and synced them to my phone. I bought a new alarm system, motion sensors, and connected everything to a 24-hour monitoring center. It cost more than I could afford, but fear is the most expensive bill you'll ever pay. Isaiah asked, "Mama, why do we have so many buttons now?" I smiled and said, "Because we're protecting our peace, baby." He nodded like a soldier being briefed on safety. The next few weeks blurred into routine. Wake up, check cameras, pack lunch, watch the driveway. Every sound made me pause. A leaf tapping the window, a cat brushing the fence, thunder rolling too close. But the more I acted, the less helpless I felt. That's the trick about fear. Once you start moving, it has to chase you to keep up. The viral videos had made me an unintentional symbol. Women from different states wrote, "Your story gave me courage." Reporters wanted interviews. Publishers wanted book rights. I refused them all. Fame was just another kind of exposure. Instead, I started writing in private. Every detail, every lie, every bruise that didn't leave a mark. I told myself it wasn't a book. It was a record. Something Isaiah could one day read and know his mother didn't break. She fought. Still, the quiet felt staged. One evening, I got a voicemail from an unknown number, only 3 seconds long. A child's voice said, "It's her." I froze. That voice was Isaiah's. My knees buckled. I replayed it again and again. Same tone, same little breath at the end. They had access to something in my home, again. I tore through every corner of the house like a woman possessed. Checked the light fixtures, the vents, even the toy chest. Then, under the lampshade beside my bed, I saw it, a faint blue glow. I leaned closer. A microcamera, the size of a fingernail, aimed right at where I slept. I dropped to the floor. My hands shook as I called the police. They came, bagged the device, traced the signal. Hours later, they told me the origin. A rental unit registered under Marin Lope, paid by a company connected to Gerald Rowe, the same disgraced law partner now on leave. Tasha filed a new motion that same night. Stalking. Violation of a court order. Invasion of privacy. Endangerment of a minor. The judge didn't hesitate. A search warrant went out the next morning. Police stormed the rental apartment in broad daylight. Inside, they found a wall of monitors, labeled folders, printed photos of me and Isaiah, and detailed notes about our routines. In the footage recovered, I could see myself sleeping, reading, cooking, even sitting in my car outside Isaiah's school. The stalker was Marin Lope, real name Melinda Griggs, an identity thief and former assistant at Dorsey, Pike and Rowe. She had been Rashad's ex-girlfriend, the one Bernice once referred to as the woman he should have married. She never left. She just waited, hidden in plain sight. When they arrested her, she laughed, like a villain in the wrong genre. Then came Rose's arrest for conspiracy and financing illegal surveillance. Finally, Rashad's indictment followed, for aiding and concealing their actions. The story exploded nationwide. What started as a secret recording in a family dining room had become a criminal case with 3 arrests and a dozen charges. The headlines read, "Teacher exposes family surveillance ring, 3 charged." The media called me the woman who turned the lens around. But I wasn't chasing glory. I just wanted peace. And this time, it finally came. Months later, I moved to a smaller town called Lakefield, where the air tasted like quiet and the neighbors waved from porches lined with sunflowers. My new house was half the size but twice the freedom. Isaiah started laughing again, the kind of belly laugh that makes angels jealous. He'd ask if he could invite friends over, and for the first time in years, I said yes without checking the windows first. Benice's lawsuit for visitation was denied. Rashad's assets were frozen. Ro lost his license. Melinda was sentenced to 8 years. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar, it just exhales. I planted Jasmine by the front steps, taught Isaiah how to bake cornbread, and learned the difference between living and surviving. At night, I'd write in my journal, not to remember the pain, but to remind myself how far I'd come. I no longer slept with a knife under my pillow. I slept with hope, but stories like mine never end with full stops. They end with commas, quiet pauses before whatever comes next. Because monsters don't always die. Sometimes, they just find new masks. And one cloudy evening, proof of that found me again. A letter slid under my door. No return address. Inside, a single photograph, a blurred image of me and Isaiah walking home from school. On the back, the same handwriting as before. Told you, it's not over. The photo trembled in my hand. It wasn't fear shaking me this time. It was anger, quiet and deep, like a drumbeat under calm water. I turned the image over again. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost proud. Told you, it's not over. I locked the doors, double-checked the alarm, and sat at the kitchen table until sunrise. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I'd learned that fear was their favorite food, and I was done feeding monsters. The police came that morning. 2 officers I already knew by name because they'd been through my house before. They photographed the letter, dusted the envelope, and took prints. One of them, a young officer with kind eyes, sighed. "Miss Miles, whoever's sending these knows the system's limits. It's likely someone connected to the old case. Could be a sympathizer, could be someone hired." I nodded. "Then let's make it public." Tasha agreed. We attached the new threat to the ongoing case. The DA arranged another hearing to extend the security order, not just around my home, but Isaiah's school and my workplace too. They added surveillance patrols to our street, unmarked cars watching what watched us. But even surrounded by protection, peace didn't return. Because fear doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it hides in your own reflection. One night, after putting Isaiah to bed, I sat at my desk going over some of my old files for the memoir I was slowly writing. While scrolling through the scanned documents, I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. The name Marin Lope wasn't on just one fraudulent deed. It appeared on 2 more properties tied to shell companies in Rashad's portfolio, both signed months before our divorce. It hit me. The surveillance, the emotional war, the smear campaign, all of it wasn't just about destroying my reputation. It was about money. The firm had built an entire shadow business model around discrediting women and seizing marital assets through staged instability. I wasn't their first target. I was just the first one who fought back and lived to tell the story. I gathered the documents, timestamped everything, and handed them to Tasha. "This isn't just my case," I told her. "It's a network." She nodded. "Then we take it federal." Within weeks, the FBI joined the investigation. They found emails, offshore transfers, and an entire list of women listed as liabilities in confidential files, ex-wives, fiancés, whistleblowers. Some of them came forward. Others were too scared. But slowly, the pattern became undeniable. They weren't just predators. They were businessmen of manipulation. By spring, indictments rolled out like dominoes. Gerald Rowe was sentenced to 14 years for wire fraud, illegal surveillance, and conspiracy. Rashad, once a polished attorney with smooth hands and expensive suits, stood in the same courtroom where he used to practice law. He got 8 years, plus a lifetime restriction from practicing again. When the judge read the sentence, he turned to me. His lips moved, a whisper I could barely hear. "Are you happy now?" I didn't answer, because happiness wasn't the point. Freedom was. Bernice didn't attend. She'd gone silent since losing her lawsuit. But when reporters caught up with her outside the church weeks later, all she said was, "She ruined my family." She was half right. I ruined the illusion of one. I bought a modest house in Maple Creek, a quiet town where people wave from porches and the biggest gossip is about whose pie won the fair. Isaiah joined a local soccer team, made new friends, and no longer flinched at the sound of a car outside. I started teaching again, part-time at a community college. My students called me Professor Zed, and on good days, I actually smiled at that. Some nights, when the wind pressed against the windows, I'd feel the ghosts of my past tapping on the glass, not to haunt me, but to remind me I survived them. I still checked the cameras once before bed, out of habit. But now, it wasn't fear. It was vigilance, a form of self-respect I'd earned. I finished the manuscript, not a revenge story, but a testimony. I titled it Through Their Eyes, but never again. In the final chapter, I wrote, "They tried to record my downfall. Instead, I recorded their truth. They watched me break. I watched them burn. They built their empire on silence. I built my freedom on evidence." The book was never meant for bestseller lists. It was for every woman who's ever been told to stay quiet and smile. It was for Isaiah, so he'd grow up knowing strength doesn't come from fighting loud, but from refusing to bow. A year later, on a calm Saturday morning, I was planting flowers when someone knocked on the door. Not a threatening knock, just 2 soft taps. A courier handed me a padded envelope. Inside, there was no note, just a flash drive labeled "Truth Keeps Moving." I didn't open it immediately. I stood there on the porch, the sun warm against my face, birds gossiping in the trees. Then I smiled. Maybe it was another warning. Or maybe, just maybe, it was someone else beginning to fight back, another woman who'd found her voice through mine. Either way, I wasn't afraid anymore. Because fear only wins when you stop living. I turned back toward the garden, hands deep in the soil, the earth cool and real beneath my fingers. And as Isaiah ran across the yard, laughing, I finally understood something. Peace isn't the absence of enemies, it's the presence of courage. If you've followed my story this far, remember this. Never let anyone rewrite your truth. Your silence is what they count on. Your voice is what destroys their lies. Sometimes, the people smiling at your table are the same ones sharpening the knives beneath it. But the truth, no matter how carefully they plan your fall, their lies will always trip them first. Because when you stand in truth, even silence becomes power. I hope this story reminds someone out there to trust your instincts, protect your peace, and never let anyone convince you that your calmness means weakness. If you love this story, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Tales by Laura, and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss the next emotional journey. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you got that same message during lunch? Until next time, my lovelies, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, silence can be a woman's loudest revenge.